Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast with Kevin Harrington and Seth Greene. Kevin Harrington is the inventor of the infomercial, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and has generated over $5 billion in TV and digital direct response sales. Seth Greene is the world's first trusted authority on cutting-edge direct response marketing, a best-selling author, and the only 3-time Marketer of the Year nominee. On the podcast, Kevin and Seth interview sharkpreneurs who share straight talk on what it takes to explode your business.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com. Welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Seth Greene. Today, I have the great fortune to be interviewing Blair LaCorte, who is the managing partner of LaCorte Ventures. He has held C-level roles in the largest live entertainment production company, ExoJet Vista, the largest private aviation company, TPG, one of the largest PE firms, Autodesk, Sun Microsystems. He's taken several companies from startup to IPO. He's currently an astronaut in training for Virgin Galactic. He is the vice chairman of the Buck Institute, the world's leading research on longevity and aging. He's worked on the Positive Coaching Alliance with amazing legendary coaches like Steve Kerr and Phil Jackson. He's worked at the Kairos Foundation with Richard Branson, Elon Musk, and Bill Clinton. I could spend the rest of our 20 minutes on his bio, but we're going to dive in. Blair, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Seth. Thanks for having me. God, I either feel like I can't keep a job or I'm really excited to be here this Thursday. I'm going to take both of those.
I'm going to go with that you're really excited and going to ask you how the heck you have accomplished so much. But let's talk about, you've led many companies through immense change. How do you know when it's time to pivot versus like doubling down?
Sure. I mean, that's the ultimate question, right? There's the classic, I'm pivoting too much, and there's the classic that I stay and I drive it right into the ground. And, my rule of thumb has always been, small change, test, get input from the people you're working with, and keep moving your feet, right? The only time you really lose in business is kind of like the only time you lose in commercial real estate, when you can't pay your debt and you can't ride out the cycle. So my learning over time has been, to be an entrepreneur or to be entrepreneurial, there's 2 skills that you have to remind yourself that you have. One is fact finder. I have to know where I am, how close I am to the edge, how much cash I have. And the second is this whole idea of quick start. And quick start is that impulse to say, let me test, let me pivot, let me try something. But the 2 have to work together, because again, if you spend too much time on a failed concept, you're going to run out of money. And if you don't try some things and shake it up, you'll just ride a slow death. So what I would say to you is, if you're feeling that there's a lot of tension in being an entrepreneur, then you're right. There's a lot of tension. That's why a lot of people fail, right? And a lot of people shouldn't be entrepreneurs if you can't handle that tension and you're not excited by it.
What are some of the most common mistakes we make as business owners and leaders when reacting to disruption, and how can we avoid that?
Sure. I will actually step back from my philosophical self and my role in the Buck Institute. Look, the human brain does 2 things extremely well. It's hardwired in. One of them is your amygdala is looking for danger. And the better you are at predicting it and seeing it, this is back to this fact finder, and avoiding it, the better you survive. The other is looking for love. You could say looking for love in all the wrong places, but looking for love, because when you're calm and when your parasympathetic nervous system is calm, you can make really good decisions because your executive function has the time to process through it. So I would equate, love in business to knowing that you're in the right place and not panicking at that moment in time. So the biggest mistake that I think people make is that they think they have to solve everything at once. You don't. If you're in kick save every day, then you're pivoting the wrong way. But if you're in kick save once a month, maybe that's just the cost of doing business where you're innovating. Change is really hard. And again, if it was easy, if we could do a test in college and say you're the smartest, you're going to be successful in business, we would do it. If it was just who worked the hardest, we could test for strength and endurance, we'd do it. The fact of life is that in its a microcosm in an entrepreneur is that business is all about people and patterns. And people and patterns during change is when you make money. You don't make money when things aren't changing, because the big companies who are already set, or the people who already have a product, just actually grind you down. So don't think of change as a negative. Look at change as an opportunity, right? The opportunity is that you could pick up more margin, you could pick up more market share, or you could learn something. So the second you start looking at change as the time to be calm and be happy, the better off you'll be.
Amen to that. You mentioned the Buck Institute. How did you, as a non-scientist, get to be vice chairman of the world's leading research organization on longevity and aging?
All right. Other than I have a great personality and people like me, I think I've been fortunate to have learned something really early on. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs, and so I'm going to give you maybe mea culpa. I am not a serial entrepreneur, although many people introduce me that way. And if you look in my resume, you'd say, "Oh my God, he's done so many things." I'm someone who grew up with a lot of trauma. My parents were divorced. They were both entrepreneurs. The trauma was every month we had to pay our rent. Right. And so I became someone who was very acutely aware of what entrepreneurship was, hated the fact that I was under pressure, but figured out a way to help my parents survive. Right. So when I got out of, let's be clear, when I finally graduated and I was leaving after, working for both of my parents and then doing an all-night gas station at night to make money for myself, I actually went to undergrad business in University of Maine. I went to a training program in G, and then I got an MBA. That's insane. That's insane. I mean, you don't learn business by going to school, but I was so convinced that I could get out of that turmoil by educating my way out of it. I missed the forest through the trees. So when I graduated business school, I went to a tiny little consulting firm that did change management. I turned down a firm called McKinsey, awesome firm. And I went to a 20-person firm that literally would put you 5 days a week into DuPont in a factory, or at Mobile upstream and in the snow-covered tundra. And I would deal with what kind of change had to be made. And I learned that what I had been trained to do was to actually help people with the change. So you have to decide what you're good at. So I'm a great partner to entrepreneurs because I don't need to actually have something done. But when I find someone who's found something that's going to kill them if they don't do it, I try to figure out how to help them. And that's kind of my, deal with change, is that, it takes a village, right? And I'll give you one last thing, which is, people ask me sometimes, because if you look at my background, not that you should, but half of my time I've been in restructuring and half of the time I've been in growth companies. And you could say, well, the restructuring was just that you got unlucky, and the growth was that you got lucky. And it's really not true. The fact of life is, back to this idea around change, those two places offer an opportunity for someone to make a difference. A restructuring means that something's gone wrong. You're probably going to get rid of 60% of your exec staff. You have to look at the history to figure out how you got there, and then you have to come up with a strategy how to move somewhere else. A growth company is, you need to do something to double again, and they're having trouble doing it. So you're actually looking at a very successful staff. You're going to get rid of 60% of them because they're not the right people. You got to listen to how they got there, and then you got to come up with a strategy to go somewhere. They're really the same thing. We like to actually talk about them differently, but you have to decide, are you set up for change? And if you are, then not being an entrepreneur or not being entrepreneurial, like I'd say I am, makes you sick. I spent a middle part of my career in investing, awesome people. I would have made more money staying in investing, but I would not have necessarily been as happy because, you got to find your tribe.
Absolutely. LaCorte Ventures is a family office engaged in seed investing and advisory services for early stage venture and middle market private companies. Who is an ideal client for you in that space?
Sure. So I use that in all honesty as a way to work with people I want to work with, where I put a little money in and then I spend time with them because they're not a coaching client, they're actually an investing client. So there is no rhyme or reason to, why I have, my a buddy who's the ex head of Puma Design, and we have a shoe company. I have a solar company with my buddy who I help sell the largest solar development company in the country. We're starting it up. If I find something that I want to learn about, because I'm a very curious person, and I find a person I want to learn from, because you do learn from these, everybody you work with, then I, will throw a little bit of money in. But quite honestly, it's not about the sector. It's about the opportunity to, become a better person. Because, my real love when you look at my mastermind and coaching business is, I have 50 CEOs from 42 different industries. I wake up every day and get to learn something and add value and think about different things. That makes me happy.
So how did the mastermind group come about? Tell us a little bit more.
So serendipitously, again, I'm a big believer that, if you are good and you have relationships and continuity over time, you'll bump into friends who'll say, look, I think you should get involved in this. I happened to get involved with Tony Robbins many, many years ago when I was running the Jet company. And then when we ran the world's largest live entertainment company again. And through him, I had met one of his good friends, Jay Abraham, who's a legend in marketing. And he had a little group, 15 people, but it really wasn't what he loved to do. So it was an offshoot. And I said, hey, listen, I'll come in and partner with you. Eventually, he stepped back and I took it over. We've gone from 15 to 45 people, which I think is a great size of a group. And 4 times a year we get together, and the rest of the time we do things by phone. But I would say, not to underestimate that I can be a good partner. At least half of the value in the group is that the group helps each other, right? There's nothing like hearing from someone who's the leader in portable trailers for construction sites, telling you something about people management that you think, oh my God, that's exactly the issue I have, and then learning from them. I mean, I call this funnel vision. The patterns are not actually mutually exclusive to one vertical, but most of us don't get to actually see what's happening in other verticals. And so again, being open to the world and realizing that you can learn from anyone.
Absolutely. And Jay is a legend and has been on the show multiple times. So greatly appreciate that connection. You are passionate about a number of causes, including the Positive Coaching Alliance and the Kairos Foundation. Talk a little bit about your work there, because you work with some legendary coaches and entrepreneurs and thought leaders.
Sure. And again, I'm going to give you my opinion, which is, worth the listeners what you paid for it. But hopefully there's something in here that, maybe resonates with you. What I figured out early on in life, I had, 8 brothers and sisters now, all step in half and a mishmash of families and things like that. And so I never went to an event that someone wasn't fighting and that someone wasn't blaming someone else in the room for why they were fighting. So I dealt with a lot of this, how do people get along? And I was always fascinated by it. And so when we talk about patterns, business patterns, we also talk about what people do. And so what I found out is that if you look at mental health, if you look at team building and business, and if you look at physical health, they're all based on the same thing. The number one factor in achieving good mental health, good team, and business health, and in physical health is this whole idea of how you connect. Right? It's a force multiplier. You look at the core 4, we all talk about it. What do you eat? How much do you exercise? How much do you sleep? And where, what's your exosome? Do you expose yourself to negative chemicals and things like that? But they are all multiplied by, between 10 and 20, depending on who you believe, by the fact that if you don't have this first thing, this, vitamin C, not the nutraceutical, but vitamin connection, humans are designed to connect. And the biggest connection and the most powerful is a dyadic, which is the one-on-one relationship between people. Group relationships are powerful, but not as powerful as having at least a few people in your life that you believe care about you and that you trust. And so all of those organizations that you named have 2 things in common. One is that they're all about positivity and connection. And the second is that they're all about youth. So if you look at the Kairos Foundation, we would go out around the world, and I was the only. I remember when all of us mentored people. When I remember being on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and the CEO of the stock exchange was bringing me over to introduce me to. We had picked 50 people, and I was going to mentor this one. And he comes up, and Richard Branson, and he's waiting to hear who's going to mentor him. And he said, "Oh, I just want I'm going to introduce you to Blair LaCorte." And the kid who I became his mentor and one of my best friends said, "Who the F is Blair LaCorte?" Right? But it's a way to get into college students, right? If you look at Project Adventure and Outward Bound, we were actually looking at self-esteem for high school and junior high school students. If you look at the Positive Coaching Alliance, if you've been in kids sports and you're a parent or a coach, you've taken one of our courses, it's all about impacting kids at one of the most vulnerable times between 8 and 12 years old, where values are done. That is the way that we make better human beings, is that there's a moment in time where we're all going to have to deal with both values and self-confidence. And somewhere between 12 and 16, we're going to then, pull back and start to try to figure out who our tribe is. And we worry more about our friends than us. So I felt like it's my obligation, not just with my kids, but to pay back the things that people have done for me, which is to care. And so I'm just a huge believer. And do I believe that it doesn't work when you're older? No, I do believe it works, but it's a lot harder because you've got to peel back your subconscious biases, right? And if you're willing to do it, and you're going to talk, I'm married to a psychotherapist. She's done phenomenal work. If you're willing to put some time in, you can take the chip on your shoulder that was driving you to be an entrepreneur, and you can turn it around as also a strength as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. You mentioned vitamin C connection. How do you balance it? I mean, because you have hundreds of meaningful relationships and thousands of contacts. How do you manage all that?
Yes, thank you for asking that question, because I've been writing a book for 5 years, and I know that sounds bad, but it's in the journey, and it's been on the updating of Dunbar's number. So Dunbar's number, for those of you who remember, is this seminal thing, and it was a very unique person. He was a psychoanalyst and he was an anthropologist. He came up with this number based on the size of the neocortex to the size of the brain in mammals, on how many people you could actually connect with. And the number is somewhere around 150. You may have heard of this, how many family, how many friends, how many acquaintances, how many business friends down the line. And the number is extremely consistent. Now, you also, if you read the book Tipping Point, you'd hear about connectors and mavens and things like that. They actually cross over each other. So one of the things I've been studying is tribalism, and how do you connect with those 150 people? Because that sense of safety is what we all strive for. But then how to expand that, instead of making a linear number, making it a geometric number, which means that I may have these nodes that are near and dear to me, and I've recognized them. How do I move someone from an acquaintance to a friend? And there's methodologies. How do I actually take someone who's a friend and actually access their network? How do I take someone who's an institutional connection? So I went to college with them. I loved them. I haven't seen them in 10 or 15 years. How do I light that up so that it actually becomes just as powerful as it was? So this is around, network and energy. And truly, if you looked at the literal analogy, humans are, all it is energy, right? And so I think that for me, I have given up guilt. So I do not feel bad. Like when someone calls me up out of the blue and says, "Hey, I haven't talked to you in a long time," I look at the positive and say, "Thank you for calling me. How are you doing?" I don't say, "Oh my God, I never called him back," or "I didn't help this person." I get over myself. Right? Because we all have these defensive mechanisms, and they're based, again, on this whole idea of fear and love. The only thing that stops love is fear. Like, should I open up, and should I be exposed, and should I be vulnerable? And I'm going to apologize in advance, because I'm going to give you one more thing that I think is a powerful tool that someone can look up after this podcast. First-year psychologists said this thing called the Johari window. And the Johari window is very simple. What do you show the outside world that makes you fit into the tribe? So if you went to my LinkedIn, you'd see my public image, and you'd say, "Oh, he's a good guy. He likes people. He does charities." And those are the things that you expose. There are two things that makes your Johari window grow. And that one of them is vulnerability, that you tell people that things that aren't always great about you, and you build a deeper relationship so they really like you. And the second is having people tell you things about yourself that you don't want to hear. If you can do those two things, your connections can grow geometrically versus linear. because you'll open up new networks very, very quickly. Because think about it as an electrical impulse. When you open up a node and it's going to decide whether it fits in that thing, the power of that node to light up other nodes makes it easier to connect. Colin Powell once told me one of the best advice I ever had was, in meeting people, have a sense of who you are and integrity, let them know, and then watch where they attach to you. Go all the way down that branch and connect, but remember to come back to who you are. And you can connect, branches can connect to a lot of different people without changing yourself or sucking up to people or diluting yourself, right? And so I think if people have a chance, the jury window is a technical thing, but think about it in the bigger sense. How do I become more vulnerable, and who? Because it's risky. And who do I listen to that may not even be a close friend, but that will teach me something about myself that makes me a better person?
That is great advice. We know your time is incredibly valuable. We greatly appreciate you spending some of it with us. For our folks who are watching or listening, where is the best place for them to go learn more about you and everything you're up to?
Sure. Two places. One is if you need a question answered, I can hook you up with someone, go to my LinkedIn. The second is, we have a website for our coaching thing, and we have a lot of videos up there, and we give them away for free. It's PPE Mastermind. Go check that out as well. And don't lose the power and don't lose the energy, because this isn't just about entrepreneurship, creating jobs. It is creating tribes. And that is what we need more of in this country, is tribes that self-reinforce, that connect people together, and that make us the greatest country in the world. So thank you guys all out there for doing what you do. And because I wouldn't have anything to do if not, because without entrepreneurs, I wouldn't get to partner.
Well, thank you very much. We will go check out PPE Mastermind. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Blair, for joining us again. And thank you, everybody, for watching or listening. We'll talk to you or see you next time.
Why do so many businesses struggle while others seem to explode overnight? Do you wish you had the secret to this type of exponential growth? Now, I've scaled more than 20 businesses to over $100 million, and it's not just luck. In my new book with Mark Tim, Mentor to Millions, you'll learn the repeatable framework I use in all my business ventures for massive success. Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.